Hello everybody, this is Rachel and Megan. For those of you who may not have seen us before, we are community pharmacists. We've been practicing as pharmacists for over 4 years now, and we are committed to, I suppose, bringing solutions forward that can offer people long-term health solutions. So as pharmacists, we dispense medication a lot, and often we see that by introducing a lot of lifestyle changes that people can get themselves healthier in a more long-lasting way. So today the theme is sleep. It's something that we've noticed that people are struggling with a lot over the past year, really, because we're a year in COVID now, and people's routines are thrown. Anxiety levels are a little bit higher than normal, and people are not getting the sleep that they need and the sleep that they'd like. So that's what we're going to touch on today. So I think when we think about our health, we tend to focus a lot on diet and exercise, but sleep is a really important pillar of health that a lot of us underestimate, and it's really vital. And adults need at least 7 hours of sleep every night, but preferably 8, and teenagers need at least 8 hours, but preferably 9 hours of sleep every night, and a lot of us aren't getting that. Back in 1942, the average person was sleeping for just under 8 hours, 7.9 hours, but now the average is 6 hours and 13 minutes. So our sleep time has decreased by 20% over quite a short period of time. And sleep, it can be associated with being a bit lazy or precious or unproductive, but to lead a full and healthy life, we need our sleep because it allows our body and our mind to rest and leaves us recharged for the next day. So I'm just going to briefly touch on what sleep is and why it's important. So sleep is a state where awareness to environmental stimuli is reduced, but it's still a very dynamic activity. And although the exact function of sleep isn't quite clear, we know that it's as essential for survival as food and water is. Now, there are a lot of different stages to sleep, and I'm just going to go through them just so that you kind of know what's happening every night. So the first stage, which is stage 1, is when you're starting to fall asleep. So you're starting to get a little bit drowsy, and that's the shortest phase of sleeping. And then you wake up quite easily during that phase. So it's just light sleep. And then after stage 1, you go into stage 2 of sleep. And this is where you start to go into a little bit of a deeper sleep. Your heart rate starts to slow and your body temperature starts to drop and your muscles start to relax. So that's stage 2. Then after stage 2, you go into stage 3 and stage 4. And stage 3 and stage 4, that's when you go into a really, really deep sleep and your muscles completely relax. And this is the stage of sleep that is really, really necessary for all the health benefits that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And a lot of that deep stage 3-4 sleep you get in the first half of the night. Then as you move into the second half of the night, you start to get a lot more of the REM sleep. So it's called the rapid eye movement stage of sleep because your eyes move quite a lot. There's a lot of rapid movement there. And in this phase of sleep, you start to have quite a lot of vivid dreams. Now you can have dreams in stage 3 and 4, but the dreams that you have in the REM cycle of sleep, which is that sleep that you get in the latter half of the night most of the time, is where you get the really vivid dreams. And at that point, actually, your brain starts to get a little bit more active because you're coming towards the early hours of the morning and you're actually coming towards getting a bit more awake. Most of us would have about 4 to 6 sleep cycles per night, and the composition of each sleep cycle and the length varies. So, you might, in one sleep cycle, you might spend a lot of time in stage 3. The next stage cycle might be spend a lot in the REM stage. It just depends. It all really, really varies as the night goes on. So that's just a little background on our sleep cycle. And I think it's just really important to know that a healthy sleep cycle, you want to be spending enough time in those deep sleep stages. So the stage 3 of the non-REM cycle and then the REM cycle, you want to be spending enough time in those parts of the sleep cycle to make sure that you're getting enough, I suppose, restoration for the next day. And sleep is controlled by our sleep-wake cycle, which is one of our most important circadian rhythms. So we as humans have circadian rhythms where our bodies, which is our body's internal biological clocks. So these circadian rhythms tell our body when to start making enzymes for digestion, when to adjust our body temperature, and when to sleep and when to wake up. So our sleep-wake cycle is influenced by environmental cues, particularly light. So during the day, the light sends signals to our brain to generate alertness. And then as night falls, that sends signals to our body to start quietening down by producing a hormone called melatonin, which we're going to talk about later on. So that's how a stable, healthy circadian rhythm or sleep-wake cycle works. So I'm just going to touch now on some aspects of our health that sleep has a really profound effect on, starting with the immune system. So our immune system suffers if we don't get enough sleep. And most of us know that if we go through a relatively long period of time without getting enough sleep, we start to feel really tired, really run down, and we nearly know instinctively that we're going to pick up any cold or flu that's going. And it has been shown that immune cells, called natural killer cells that help fight off infections and illnesses, are 70% less active in people that get 4 hours of sleep or less every night. So when we sleep, our immune system releases proteins called cytokines, and these cytokines have a role in protecting us against inflammation and infection. So the less sleep we get, the less of those protective cytokines that we have in our body. So that's our immune system. Lack of sleep can also affect our sexual and reproductive system. So, and this is both in men and women. So lack of sleep in men significantly reduces the amount of testosterone in a male body and can cause hormonal imbalances in women, which can lead to problems with sex drive and fertility. Sleep also affects our nutrition and weight. So if you think of when you've had a really bad night's sleep, the next day you tend not to have the energy to go out exercising. And when you get hungry, you're much more likely to turn to foods like buns and chocolate or chips rather than the salad and the veg and all the healthy stuff. And this is for two reasons. So first of all, lack of sleep leads to the release of a hormone called ghrelin, which leads to an increase in appetite. And then also when we don't have enough sleep, our mental faculties, so our decision-making skills and our focus and our discipline are not as sharp. So we start to make bad decisions like eating bad food. And then leading on from that, sleep has an enormous effect on our brain function. And the truth is that during the really deep stages of sleep, there's a lot of brain processing going on. And scientists have carried out brain scans on people during the really deep stages of sleep. And what they saw was that during these stages, there's lots of healthy brain activity, there's lots of bursts of electrical activity and powerful brain waves. And what's basically happening is short-term memories are being shifted into long-term memories. And you don't achieve that memory consolidation if you don't get the required amount of sleep. There's an analogy that basically says it's like when you get your sleep, you're clicking the save button on everything that you've learned that day. And many tests and experiments have been done to test the effect of sleep on cognitive function, and all the results show that lack of sleep impairs our ability to learn new facts and solve problems by about 40%. So essentially we need sleep before learning so that we can observe new facts and memories, and then we need sleep after learning to retain it all. Lack of sleep is also very closely linked with a lot of mental illnesses like anxiety and depression, and there's a particularly strong connection between lack of sleep and paranoia. So it can be a very tricky circle because mental illness and sleep, they're really closely connected, and the question often arises, is the anxiety and the depression causing the lack of sleep, or is the lack of sleep offsetting anxiety and depression? And so breaking the cycle by identifying and modifying behaviors that are worsening sleep problems is really, really, really important. A lot of people don't see the effects of sleep deprivation until the problem is corrected. So often you might, your immune system might be very bad, or you might be suffering from anxiety. And then when the sleep problem is corrected, you realize, my goodness, it was the lack of sleep and it's because I was so tired. And it's only afterwards that you realize that. It's only in hindsight. So I think it's vital that people start understanding that sleep is not a luxury, it's a biological necessity. And the saying, you sleep when you die, I think that's really a bit silly, because when you look at all the evidence that I laid out there, it's not very prudent, because clearly by reducing your sleep, you're shortening your life, or at least lessening your quality of life. So I think we shouldn't underestimate how important sleep is. So on that note, Megan is going to talk to us about what happens when our sleep cycle isn't working the way it should.
I love what you said, Rachel, about biological necessity, and like that it's so restorative and so beneficial, and there's just so many different ideas and thoughts about sleep, but yeah, it's vital essentially. So yes, we're going to look next at when sleep is affected and what that looks like and some causes. So you've often probably heard of the term insomnia. So insomnia is where there's difficulty either falling asleep, staying asleep, or poor sleep quality, or a mixture. So some people can get to sleep, but they wake up a lot, and some people have trouble actually even falling asleep in the first place. So it can manifest very differently. You know, most people would have the odd sleepless night or two. It could be stress, an interview, something like that. But insomnia is really when you regularly have problems sleeping. And it starts to affect your daytime activities, because as Rachel mentioned all about the concentration, it actually starts to affect the next day. And it usually gets better by changing sleep habits, which Rachel's going to talk about next, about sleep hygiene. But sometimes there's a need for a sleep aid or a sleeping tablet or something like that. And we're going to look at the treatment options again later in this health talk. So to check if you have insomnia, there's a few questions. I'm going to actually read them here. And these are, you might be in the realm of insomnia if you answer yes to these regularly. Like I said, a sleepless night can happen to anybody, but if this is kind of ongoing. So if you regularly find it hard to go to sleep, if you regularly wake up several times during the night, if you regularly lie awake at night, wake up early and cannot go back to sleep, still feel tired after waking up, find it hard to nap during the day even though you're actually tired, if you feel tired and irritable during the day, or if you find it difficult to concentrate during the day because you're tired. So as you can see there, insomnia can manifest a variety of problems, and it's when that's ongoing that, you know, you'd get away with the odd night of sleep missed, but when it starts to compound, you start to notice the daytime effects, and sleep health is vital. So we've got short-term insomnia and long-term insomnia. So short-term insomnia is a brief episode of difficulty sleeping. We're usually looking at days or weeks, and it can be in response to a stressful life event, but generally it lasts less than 3 months. And chronic insomnia then is more a long-term pattern of difficulty sleeping, and it's considered chronic if there's trouble sleeping, falling asleep or staying asleep at least 3 nights per week for 3 months or longer. So you're into the 2-3 month stage that it's still happening. That's considered chronic insomnia. So the different treatment options are obviously mapped to the characteristics, so which specific part of the sleep cycle is affected in you, and how long it's been going on for. And it's obviously so important to pinpoint the cause, because there's a variety of different things that can affect the sleep. So we're going to look at some of the causes of insomnia. Some of them are very common and some are less common. So what causes insomnia? So we've got stress, anxiety, depression. And again, the stress can then, you could be stressed about falling asleep, and that can affect sleep and everything. So they can be very interlinked. Noise, a very basic one, but noise can actually affect whether it's a dog barking or just some kind of house noises that can actually interrupt the sleep, and you can be thinking about the noise, and not only is it distracting you, but it's causing a pattern of insomnia. A room that's too cold or hot, again, part of the sleep cycle is the body drops temperature just as you're falling asleep. So if the room is too hot or too cold, it can affect that natural process. Alcohol, caffeine, and nicotine, they can all affect the sleep quality. Obviously, caffeine is a stimulant and nicotine, whereas alcohol can actually disrupt the sleep quality. Drug use can affect the sleep. Jet lag, shift work. We see a lot of people coming in for sleep aids to do with shift work, and they're trying to then sleep during the day, which is a bit more difficult because it's working against the light-dark cycle. Some illnesses that can cause insomnia, so mental health conditions, restless leg syndrome, we see that a lot, overactive thyroid. So in cases like that, it's really important not just to treat the insomnia, but to treat the root cause of the insomnia, which is that medical condition. Some medications can cause insomnia, and long-term pain is another common one that we see that people can't get comfortable, and that actually affects the sleep. Then there's some breathing disorders that can affect sleep, like snoring and sleep apnea, which is interrupted breathing while sleeping. And that's a serious sleep disorder, and that would be looked at with a doctor. And the last one on that list is narcolepsy. So that's kind of spontaneously falling asleep anywhere during the daytime. So as we can see there, insomnia can be caused by a variety of different things, and it makes sense to map the treatment to the actual cause. So really figuring out what's causing it is so important. I forgot to mention actually there as well, we have nightmares or night terrors that can really affect people, and it can affect the sleep quality and not getting full restful sleep because people are nearly afraid to fall asleep. So sleep is a whole field of research, as we've realized, even from work and also from preparing this, there's a myriad of different things. So it's about getting to the root cause and coming up with a plan. And as I mentioned earlier, sleep hygiene and your sleep routine is vital, and that involves adjusting the routine of the day and the evening and the environment, and that helps improve the sleep quality and prevents feeding into the insomnia. So Rachel, you're going to take us away on sleep hygiene, they call it.
Yes, sleep hygiene. So that essentially means setting it. Well, one of the most important aspects is setting a good sleep routine for yourself, and this takes a little bit of time and a little bit of patience, and sometimes it might be one step forward, two step back, but you really need to be persistent with this, because it really will produce long-lasting effects. So the really key to setting a good sleep routine is to go to bed and get up at the same time every single day, regardless. Even if it's a Saturday, that's kind of where people kind of fall down on, and is how people really find it hard to keep their sleep routine, is the weekend comes and it just, everything is thrown off balance. So even if you have to do it for, you know, a few months, to go to bed and get up at the same time every single day, and also to try and avoid naps during the day. So that's the first thing. The second thing then is to avoid caffeine. So caffeine, when we say caffeine, we mean coffee, tea, caffeinated drinks, chocolate as well has got quite a bit of caffeine. So avoid it before, I say before bedtime, but especially coffee, I would say to avoid that nearly later in the day at all. So coffee has a very long half-life. So basically the amount of time it takes for half of it to be eliminated from the body. So it has a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours. So it takes 5 to 6 hours for half of the caffeine to get out of your body. So if you drink a cup of coffee at noon, at 6 p.m., half of the caffeine is still in your body possibly. So really long half-life. So the earlier in the day that you can drink your caffeine, the better. If you like the idea of a soothing drink at nighttime, try and go with something like chamomile tea or peppermint tea, something like that, because that won't affect it as much because there's no caffeine in it. And actually chamomile tea tends to help people to relax a little bit. Alcohol as well. So people kind of think that alcohol, and it makes you sluggish and sleepy and drowsy, but you don't get good quality sleep when you drink alcohol. So it affects your sleep cycle. So yes, you might fall asleep, but you don't get that really good restorative sleep. You don't get as much of the REM sleep I was talking about, which is the final stage of sleep where you have those vivid dreams, which is really, really important for your body to get all those health benefits that I was mentioning. So not good for your sleep cycle, alcohol isn't. So I would avoid drinking too much alcohol. Then keeping your bedroom set at around 18 degrees Celsius. Megan was mentioning about too hot or too cold. I've moved into a new house, and it is one of these now that has a thermostat. So it's something that I'm really conscious of, keeping the temperature. I always keep the temperature upstairs a lot lower than the temperature downstairs, and that really works for me, and it really helps me with my sleep. I keep upstairs at 18 degrees Celsius all the time. You're better off to keep the room kind of cool and then just layer up as you need. It just makes it much more, it makes it easier for you then to adjust the temperature for yourself throughout the night. Add a blanket, take it off. Keeping the room as dark as you can is really, really important. If you need to go and invest in blackout blinds, it might be worth the investment. So keep lights dim about a half an hour at least before going to bed, and try and keep away from laptops, phones, iPads, anything with a blue light, because bright lights, including the blue light from electrical devices, can inhibit the release of melatonin, and melatonin is an important sleep producing hormone that Megan's going to probably touch on in a few minutes. So keeping away from the computer, and that takes a little bit of discipline as well, but you will feel a difference keeping away from all those lights about a half an hour before going to bed. Setting the scene in the bedroom, declutter it and make it inviting. I think this is especially important now for people because a lot of people are working from home and are working in their bedrooms, or school people studying in their bedrooms. And when they go to sleep, all of that is still surrounding them. A lot of people, they'll still have all their work stuff, they'll still have all their school books. It's really hard. Now, a lot of people don't have a choice. There's nowhere else for them to do it. But even if you could at least have maybe a desk, and then clear off the desk completely. Even put the books or something into a different room so that it's out of sight, out of mind, and it feels like a bedroom again. Obviously, if there is an option to sleep in a different room than you're working in, that is great, but I know a lot of people don't have that option. Also, when I say setting the scene in the bedroom, clean bed sheets. Sometimes people forget about that, but like clean the bed sheets often and make it nice and clean, and they smell nice and you feel nice. The clean pajamas, showering before you go to bed is really kind of therapeutic, and it just can, I suppose, make you feel good going to bed, which can help you sleep. Baths before beds as well is lovely, especially if you wanted to add some, you can get magnesium creams and stuff, magnesium bath salts, lavender oils are lovely as well in the bath. Don't go to sleep until you're sleepy. I think that's very, very important. And I think if you're not sleepy, the key is not, instead of going to something like the television to try and tire you out, reading is the best option for a before sleep activity. There's a reason that parents read to their children before going to bed. It's because it just helps people sleep. And I would definitely go towards like happy, cheerful, pleasant books before going to bed. A lot of actually the top CEOs, they all do it. They all read before bed. So it's definitely a bedtime activity that I would highly recommend if you're struggling to wind your mind down and tire it out in a healthy way before going to sleep. And then don't just lie there. So if you do go to bed and you start to go to sleep and you realize it's just not happening for you, get up again, do something, have a little walk, again, read a little bit. Don't go to bed too hungry or too full. I think that's important. You don't want to be sitting there with a rumbling stomach, not able to go to sleep. You also don't want to be sitting there feeling really terrible and really sluggish and not able to go to sleep. So try and get that balance. And also drinking too much before going to bed. Now, I'm all about being well hydrated, but if you drink too much, especially tea and stuff going to bed, you may need to have to get up to urinate during the night, and that won't help sleep. Get your worries out of your head. So if there is something that's bothering you and you know it's affecting your sleep, try and solve it. If you have a little worry journal, that's quite good as well. You can just scribble down anything that you want to get out of your head, and it's kind of out of your head and on the sheet of paper. Meditation, I'm a massive fan of meditation. I think it really, really helps. And it can help not just before bed, but if you do it during the day, it really does help to slow down your nervous system and can help you when you go to bed as well. So finding a meditation that works for you, even if it's only 5 minutes before bed, 10 minutes before bed, do it. And meditation, I would say, is something that can take a little bit of practice. So if the first time, the second time you're kind of really struggling to get your mind quiet, keep going at it. You know, it's a skill that you develop, and you will get good at it, and you will. And the deep breathing as well really, really helps to slow down the nervous system. And then fresh air, I think, is really important to get during the day to help you sleep. Megan, I think it was you before that mentioned something which I think is really, really nice. I know I mentioned at the beginning that our sleep-wake cycle depends on environmental cues. So the light tells us to be awake and the dark tells us to go to sleep. So getting a little bit of fresh air and a little walk maybe during the day in the morning when it's bright, and then during the evening when it's dark, can nearly help to reset yourself so that your body nearly knows, okay, so it's morning time and it's night time. So that's just a nice little tip as well. And that is everything that I have to say about our sleep routine. Some simple ideas that I think can really help a lot. So now Megan is going to talk to us about supplements or things that you can get mainly in the pharmacy that may help your sleep in the short term usually.
Perfect. Thanks, Rachel. I love what you said there. And like that, it's often the routine that can actually really resolve it. And I like what you said about giving it time and patience, because it's new habits and it just doesn't happen like overnight, for want of a better word. But yeah, there's just a lot we can do. I also love the journaling. I actually keep a notebook and a pen beside my bed. And sometimes it's not even worries, but it's like, oh gosh, did I send that email? And you know, you'll be lying there hoping that you remember it in the morning, and that for me just control the falling asleep process. So I actually just have a notebook there and I write down all kinds of things there. And meditation, yes, I'm getting into meditation, but yeah, I would agree at the start, it takes a little while to get into it, but hugely benefit. And I think there's so much stimuli in the environment and at work and everything that we actually need to wind ourselves down and find a nice way of doing that, as I said. So yes, we're going to look now at some sleep aids next. So we're going to look at a variation of them. So sleep aids, while they don't get rid of insomnia, they do have their place in resetting the cycle in some instances. And the only thing is they can have side effects, and a lot of the side effects are linked to the fact that they're drowsy and help you fall asleep. So there can be a next day kind of hangover type of effect and tiredness. So the sleep aids are usually appropriate to try if changing your sleep habits hasn't worked. But that said, there's a lot of different ones, and some of them are not suitable for everybody, obviously. So it's just very important to check them out before you take anything. So if you're having trouble sleeping for months and it's really affecting your quality of life, that's when it's time to kind of speak to your doctor and actually come up with a plan. So if it's a mild case of insomnia, there's a few things you can try yourself in conjunction with the pharmacist. You can go in and have a chat. And what I will say is, you know, sometimes there's a bit of a stigma. Would you agree, Rachel, about sleep and sleeping tablets? Oh, I don't want them to think I'm on sleeping tablets. Like, we speak daily to people about their sleep, and it's actually great when people come in and just say, look, I'm having trouble sleeping, what can you recommend? And we can go through it with you. So definitely, if it's on your mind, come in and have a chat about it, and we can go through the options. And again, it can be personalized then, because as I said, some treatment options aren't suitable for certain people. So again, we'll look into the main thing is that you're diagnosing properly or as close as possible to what's actually causing the insomnia, and this guides the treatment. So, you know, there's a range of treatment options if it's kind of anxiety-based insomnia, or if it's more mechanical and it's like a problem with snoring or with sinuses. They're very different treatment styles depending on what it is. So the first thing that I want to briefly mention here, and GPs sometimes recommend this for sleep, is cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's a nice non-medication option. And this is a method to help change thoughts and behaviors that can keep us from sleeping. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention there. And we're going to look at later on, more rarely, sleeping tablets are prescribed. They're not usually used first line, and they're not usually used long term, because there can be some issues with dependence. Your body becomes dependent on them, and, you know, we want to get the sleep cycle back on track as naturally as possible, and as quickly as possible, to not be on these things long term. So sleep aids are really sleeping tablets are kind of if other methods haven't worked, but they do have their role. And I will say, like, there is a role for everything in healthcare. It's just about coming up with the best option for you. So check with your healthcare provider, that's all I'll say. Okay, so just a quick note on how best to use sleep aids. So whichever one you decide to go with, again, talking to your pharmacist or your doctor, because there's different ones, different what we call onset of action. So how long it takes to kick in. Some could be 20 minutes before bed, some an hour before bed. So you want to get the best out of it. So just important to check that out. And the main thing, as I said, is to check if it's suitable for you, if you have any medical conditions or anything going on. And reading leaflets carefully is obviously important as well. So we're going to look at six actually main categories today of sleep aids. We're going to look at natural options, herbal options. We're going to look at hormonal options, melatonin, as Rachel mentioned. We're going to look at some over-the-counter medication options. We're going to look at some prescription options, and finally some miscellaneous ones. So yeah, let's get started on that. So we have natural options. So these are in the realm of like your essential oils. Rachel, you mentioned lavender. Lavender is very popular for sleep. It's a really nice, it's a very nice essential oil for relaxation. And it can also be, as well as the fact that it can be helpful for relaxation, it can also be a nice cue for the body to wind down. Let's say if you have essential oil lavender and you kind of have it in the environment at 7 or 8 p.m. It's like your body kind of recognizes, okay, this scent, winding down now. It can kind of nicely map to that in a cue. You can get different ones. You can get just essential oils. You can get pillow sprays. There's all kinds of different things with lavender. You mentioned lavender bath salts, Epsom salts, that type of thing. So that's a really nice option. The other one that I want to mention here is a rescue remedy. A lot of people will know rescue remedy from anti-stress method, and that's very popular and very effective. I've actually taken rescue remedy for stress, for exam stress and different things, and these are Bach flower essences. So they actually have a night range as well. They have a variety. They have sprays and tablets, and this helps the body to relax and get a natural night's sleep, and you wake up feeling refreshed. And again, this is a nice non-sedative option, and there's typically no side effects with that. Now, what I will say is, you know, going by product literature, some of them say no side effects, but anything that's designed to help with sleep, there can be some drowsiness probably. So it's terms and conditions apply. And again, even antihistamines sometimes that we've seen that are typically non-drowsy can be drowsy in certain people. So just to be aware of that. So that's the next category is herbal remedies. And again, sometimes people think, well, it's herbal, it's coming from plants, it's safe. You know, in some cases they can be very strong. So just to see if it suits you, and just to bear that in mind. So the main herbal options that we sell in the pharmacy are mostly linked to valerian root extract. One of them, it's a traditional herbal remedy, and one of the main ranges that we would often sell or see being sold is CALMS, KALMS. So there's a daytime one and a nighttime one. So it's a traditional herbal remedy used for its sedative action. So it's kind of sedating, winding down the body, and it promotes refreshing and restful sleep, and relieves this kind of restlessness and sleep disturbance, typically without causing drowsiness the next day. And you take that, the nighttime one, an hour before bedtime. So that's valerian root. And then there's also another one that's very popular. I often see it, Rachel, you probably see it as well, is it's A. Vogel's Dormisan.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a mixture of valerian and hops, again, a herbal sleep remedy. And typically you won't feel groggy or tired the next morning. And why that one is probably very popular, and why I sometimes recommend it for people, is because it's in a drop form, and there's some scope to titrate the dose, obviously within the dosing recommendations. So you can kind of play around with it a bit. If it's just, you might need it here and there once, you might just need a few drops. So there's a bit of scope for adjusting it. So that one's very popular. So that's valerian mixed with hops extract. So those are some herbal options. Then we have hormonal sleep aids. So the main one is melatonin, and melatonin is a hormone that naturally is produced in the body. And as Rachel said, it's very much linked to the sleep cycle, and it helps control sleep patterns. So it doesn't actually make you sleep, but as the melatonin levels rise in the evening, it puts you in a state of what they call quiet wakefulness, and that helps promote sleep, like that winding down. So treating with melatonin is a nice option in some cases because it's mapping to the natural cycle. Obviously, it's a man-made version of melatonin, but it's capitalizing on a natural sleep pattern, and it can be useful for short term. Again, as with anything, like the longer you're on anything, it's just the long-term options of that, and it can actually affect the sleep. So short term is best. You're kind of looking to try and reset the sleep cycle, and then map the sleep hygiene routines in with that, so that will take over longer term. So melatonin helps you fall asleep quicker, and you're less likely to wake up during the night. So that's very beneficial, and it can also help with symptoms of jet lag. So in some countries, you can actually buy it over the counter. In Ireland, though, it's on prescription only. We're obviously keeping an eye on the melatonin, and most people don't have side effects with melatonin, so that's obviously good. But again, it depends on your body and how it handles it. And there are some cautions with other medications and medical conditions, as with really all of these. And what's important is really for all of these ones is not to be mixing and matching, like it's just you pick one treatment option. You don't mix melatonin with even herbal things or anything like that, because that can actually, you know, can get double up of side effects and different things like that. So melatonin takes about an hour or two to work, depending on the type you get. You can get some slow release versions as well. And you can see some improvements right away, but it can take a week or two to kind of really see some benefits and recovery from insomnia. So just to bear that in mind, you know, and again, with any treatment option, it's good to check in with your healthcare provider on how long, you know, before you're expected to see results, just so that you can have some kind of realistic expectations, I guess. And melatonin is unlikely to be addictive, so that's obviously a benefit. Okay, so then moving into medication. So we're going to look at over-the-counter options and then prescription options. So the over-the-counter, it's actually relatively newly available, is a medication called Nytol, Nytol. So this is used to relieve temporary sleeping difficulties. And again, these are short-term, you know, they have their place in their role, but if it's a longer-term issue, it's better to check it out and to just go to your doctor and get a workup and see what's actually causing it. So this is this contains 50 milligrams of a drug called diphenhydramine. And what diphenhydramine actually is, it's actually an antihistamine. You know, we've covered a lot of antihistamines in the allergy health talk, but in this case, as with a lot of antihistamines, they're drowsy. This one is particularly, it makes people particularly sleepy. So it's actually used for to induce sleep essentially. So this has a role for kind of, you know, short-term stress, jet lag, personal problems, for example, bereavement. We often see sleep aids for bereavement to help just kind of get through a very difficult time. And the night owl helps people fall asleep faster, have a longer and deeper sleep, and wake up feeling rested in the morning. So again, not to be taken long-term without consulting your GP. So if it's an ongoing thing, and again, if it is an ongoing problem with insomnia, that happens to people as well, and it just has to be treated with something that's more suitable long term. So a lot of these are just suitable in the short term, and there are options for that as well. So just with the night owl and really all the sleep aids, it's very important not to mix alcohol with them. That can be dangerous. And what's also important is that depending on how your body handles any of these, there can be some next day drowsiness. So there are some cautions on some of them with driving the next day, just to be mindful of that. So that's night owl over the counter. Again, go in and have a chat to your pharmacist. That's what we're there for. Come in and have a chat to us, and we'll go through everything with you. So then prescription medication. So in some cases, sleeping tablets are prescribed. There's some newer ones that are less dependent, but I guess the main concern with them is that they can cause dependence, which basically is that your body becomes dependent on them, and then there's withdrawal when you come off them. So the longer you're on them, the kind of harder it is to come off them. But again, that can be done. So the main group that we see often is Z drugs, zolpidem and zapaclone. So these are hypnotics, and again, they're not licensed for short-term use. So we see them kind of short-term like that if there's a bereavement or a period of chronic stress that you're just trying to reset the cycle for maybe a week or so, but we wouldn't see them prescribed typically long-term. And again, they are in some cases, and that's a case-by-case basis, obviously. So before they're prescribed, the cause of the insomnia should be established, and if there's underlying factors, those should be treated. Like I mentioned earlier, like if the cause of the insomnia is overactive thyroid, that needs to be resolved as well. So yeah, sleeping tablets, like there's a lot of stigma, oh gosh, sleeping tablets, but they do have their role, and we have seen some benefits for them in the short term, but they're used with caution due to their nature, and also long term. Rachel, you're talking earlier about the memory consolidation, like they can affect the quality of things like that. So it's a short term recalibration option rather than a long term, but again, it's there for a reason. So then the miscellaneous category, so there's a lot of options over the counter for things related to snoring, whether it's a throat spray, lozenges, or you can actually get some mechanical devices that help prop the airways a bit more open to help prevent snoring. And again, snoring can actually affect the sleep quality. It disrupts the sleep and it can wake people up and everything. So yes, that's just miscellaneous. So again, like that, come in and have a chat, because we want to see what's causing it. If you know, we might have to really evaluate what is causing the insomnia, and then it can be treated appropriately. So yeah, if the treatment kind of isn't effective, then especially the over-the-counter ones, it's time to then check in with your doctor. And again, there's some windows of time to see an effect depending on which treatment method you use. So that is a brief overview of the sleep aids. So we've got natural, herbal, hormonal, over-the-counter options, and prescription options. And again, like that, just make sure that it's suitable for you before you take anything. So that's really what we have to share with you today on sleep. And again, I wrote it down, Rachel, what you said about it. It's a biological necessity. So just to recap briefly, I guess we looked at the benefits of sleep and the role it has in general health. Sleep health is hugely important. Then things that affect sleep and what happens kind of when sleep goes wrong, essentially. And they estimate that 1/3 of people suffer with sleep disorders at some point. So it is relatively common. And again, it's just about getting yourself back on track. We looked at the routine and how that's kind of that's a huge part of managing sleep health, is your routine and sleep hygiene, and then some sleep aids and where they're appropriate. So that's it from us today. And as always, if you have any questions, we'd love to answer them. We have an email address you can send an email to. It is pharmacists dispensing-ideas@gmail.com. So like that, we're branching out from solely dispensing tablets to dispensing ideas. And again, it's about long-term health and some preventative options. So any questions, you can send them our way, and we'll see you in the next health talk.
Thank you very much.